I read this sign at a center that treated veterans for PTSD and other things like that. And the sign said, "Don't look back. You're not going that way." I loved it.
Well, welcome back to Fill in the Blanks. Today, we delve into the extraordinary life of Bob Parsons. Now, Bob is a man who defied the odds, dodged grenades, and transformed chaos into explosive success. Bob faced adversity from the outset. His parents were gamblers and struggled to make ends meet, but Bob's resilience and determination would shape his path in ways he could never have imagined. He is a Marine Corps, Vietnam combat veteran. Bob didn't just dodge literal grenades, he also navigated the chaos of war. You might recognize Bob as the founder of GoDaddy, the company that disrupted the domain registration industry and made Super Bowl ads unforgettable. But that's just one chapter. Bob's ventures span motorcycles, golf, PXG golf, as a matter of fact, real estate, finance, and really importantly, philanthropy. His audacity and innovation continue to inspire. And Bob is here to talk about his memoir, Fire in the Hole, the untold story of my traumatic life and explosive success. Now, this book pulls no punches. It's part action movie, part business playbook, and entirely authentic. I highly recommend this book. I've read it cover to cover, and you'll find it anywhere books are sold. You can get it on Amazon. You want to buy 2 copies of this, one to read and one to give somebody you care about. And they'll want to buy 2 copies, but just buy a stack of these because you're going to want to give them to people that you want to make changes in their life. Bob is with us. Bob, welcome.
Well, it's a real pleasure to be here, Dr. Phil.
I really thank you for taking the time. I know you flew here today. We just did a Dr. Phil episode, and the audience was absolutely spellbound. They were intrigued. You are a charming individual. You had them on the edge of their seats.
Well, that's why my wife married me.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. Either that or she just had a weak day. It's one of the two, right?
I think it's a combination of both.
Yeah, I think we both married way over our heads, and let's just go with that.
That's for sure.
Bob, you've had certainly not a boring life, and we're going to use some of the things that we talked about on the show here, but there are some things I want to go deeper on. And for those of you that are listening, if you haven't yet seen the show that I did with Bob and Renee, just go to Merit Plus app, which you can get on the App Store or Google Play, and download it and click on the Bob Parsons Show and watch that. It is really interesting. Now, Bob, you had a struggle with PTSD for a lot of your life, but you found some solutions to it. And one of the tools, and it is a tool, it's not a cure-all, easy fix. One of the tools is using psychedelics as part of a protocol in dealing with your PTSD. Let's talk some more about that. How did you find your way to that, and what did it involve for you?
Well, for me, it had been 49 years since the war, and I knew I had some problems.
Now, this was in July of 2018, right? So it's been
2017.
2017?
Yeah. I didn't want to go anywhere. I wanted to mostly be alone. Married to just a wonderful, wonderful woman. And I mean, to not be that way is not good. It's a good way to get cut from the team, Dr. Phil.
Yep.
Yeah. And, you know, I was depressed a lot, and, you know, sometimes just cried out of the blue, mostly when I was alone. Nobody would hear it. And so anyhow, I did a number of things, but the thing that really made the difference for me was I happened to read this book by Michael Pollan called How to Change Your Mind. And it's a wonderful book. It reads like a novel. It is a treatise on psychedelics. what they've been used for over the years. And a better way to say psychedelics is plant medicine,
Right.
right? And, and how they were first used in the country, how they became illegal, why they should be legal again, and how they can help. And, when I read that, I was just inspired. Now, I had never taken psychedelics in my life. And my first thing that I did was I told my wife, Renee, I would love to do this. And she had me hooked up with 2 guides that treated veterans and others with psychedelic, they called them tools, for a number of years. And they did it under the radar. So anyhow, I met with them a couple weeks later. And then not too long after that, we met in Hawaii. And over a period of 4 days, I was treated with 3 different types of psychedelics. The first was ayahuasca, which is a real nasty tasting thing that is made from a vine in South America. And that is a very potent psychedelic. And, when I did that, I did a, strong dose. But, it was obvious, as we got into it that, I could have used a stronger dose. But, we talked about things that were bothering me from my childhood to the war and that sort of thing. And, whenever you have to look, those sort of things head on, it is hard, and it is something that you really don't want to do again. But nevertheless, that's what we did. Some tears, and I could feel a difference after that first day. The second day, my guide told me. He said, one of my guides, he said, I made a teapot of tea made from psilocybin or magic mushrooms. And he said, it holds 3 cups. I made it very strong, so you'll only need 1 cup. Now, what I'm about to tell you, I swear is true. I drank all 3 cups, and I ate the tea bags. Now,
you went all in.
Well, I was righteously stoned.
Yeah.
And, that night I even flashed back. I had all sorts of tears, and we talked about many things. And, I could tell I was hallucinating at times. But after that, I was like, I was so much better. And the next day, we took the day off, and Renee and I, my wife, went and played golf. We played 9 holes, and Phil, I knew that all the fauna knew I was there. The trees and the plants and the grass. I could feel them. And, they were looking at me with kindness. Now that sounds nuts, but that's how I felt. And when I went to putt, it was like the grass on the green would say to me, hit it here, Bobby. And I would, and it'd go right in the cup. I have never putted that good before or since, but boy, I sure did with the help of the plants and the grass. So the last day, it was LSD, and that was that was very strong, and again, a lot of tears, a lot of seeing things that had me just tore up, and I just forgave it and looked past it. It's not like it. Before that, I couldn't even think about it, but then I could. Did it still bother me? Yeah, a little bit. But I was past it, and I was moving forward. And so after that, everybody noticed the change in me. My flash temper gone, my self-isolation gone. I wanted to be with other people go places with Renee. And it's just I was more kind, more willing to listen, more willing, and to compliment, so forth. The people that my wife was the first to notice. Then when I went to work, people were saying, "What happened to Bob? This guy here is the nicest guy I've ever worked for." I mean, it just was so nice. And like I've told you, it had been 49 years since the war. I finally came home.
I'm not saying that it is right for everybody, but I think people can make up their own minds about this, and they have to determine. You were years, decades of living with this. There gets a point when you say, I've got to be willing to do something different than what I've been doing, because if it's not working and you're living with the same thing year after year after year, you got to be willing to try something different. I'm not saying this is that something different, but if what you're doing is not working, you either need to change therapists, change modalities, do something, but not just live and continue to suffer. Sometimes people's suffering gets so deeply entrenched, they just think that's the way to live.
Yeah. Well, that's for sure. And that is something that you would need to overcome. Now, there is one thing that I believe should be mentioned. There is an African plant called the iboga plant, and there's a psychedelic that's derived from it called ibogaine. And ibogaine is the only plant that I'm aware of that a 3 or 4 day treatment can cure a heroin or a cocaine, an opioid addiction. Absolutely cured. The individual doesn't want it anymore. And that is in Tijuana. There's a number of clinics that specialize in that. Now, one of the problems with the ibogaine is it's can put a strain on an individual's heart, and these clinics are excellent with monitoring that. And if they tell you they'll get you through it, they will. But the one thing I will tell you is anybody that has been treated with ibogaine will tell you that it is rocket ship intense. They will face everything that they need to face, and it will be harsh. They will vomit a lot. They will. I mean, it is just an unbelievable thing. Now, with the strain on the heart, that's the reason why. One of the reasons why the FDA has not approved it for use in the United States. Now, Dr. Phil, let me ask you a question. How many people would you say this country uses to opioids taken the wrong way or containing fentanyl or some other stuff like that a year?
I think it's in the hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, hundreds of thousands. Now, how many people would you think we lose a year due to not being able to handle ibogaine?
I would think it's a very low number.
About 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And, I have some friends, and I had three of them, and they all had their sons that were addicted to heroin. And I pointed them to these clinics in Mexico, and they opted that, they said, no, I can't send my son down there, and put him through that. 2 of those 3 are now dead from overdoses. So, and I mean, they would not have died if they went down to Tijuana and found the right clinic.
You went from starting a business in your basement to selling it for $64 million.
I did.
How'd you do that?
Well, one step at a time.
Yeah.
It was, not easy at first. It took me a while to learn how to sell shrink wrap software. I mean, it took me about 3 years, but once I did, it was off to the races.
Well, you taught yourself how to do coding and all, right?
I did. Yeah, with my real job, I was at Redwood City, California, and I had a big delay to catch the flight. I was going back to Baltimore. And so I went to the Stanford campus and I bought a book on programming in a basic computer language. I read that during the layover, wrote my first computer program or two on the flight back. And it just so happened back in 1975, we were owned by a company called Control Data, one of the first computer companies. And there was a dumb terminal in my office that ran the basic computer language. So that's how I learned how to do it.
I mean, you read it during the layover.
I did, yeah.
How'd you stay awake? Computer coding books are hard to read. That's not easy to do.
Well, you know, at the time, Dr. Phil, I found it pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And it really charged me up and kept me going. And part of that was PTSD. You know, I like to bury myself in things, and the PTSD kept me going.
Because you escape from some of that when you really dig into something, right? You lose yourself into content, yeah. Now, you write in your book, Fire in the Hole, about the biggest lesson you learned. And I actually had an excerpt pulled up of it. All you have in this world is your word. That's your value. If you establish a reputation for keeping your promises and for being as solid as your handshake, it will always serve you well. To this day, everything I do in business starts from these lessons. I still live by them, even now. Knowing you, I can attest that's how you are, and that is your reputation. Where did that come from?
You know, it is just something that, you know, I did over the years. My father was somebody, you know, he wasn't much of a businessman, but he always kept his word. You know, he told me that you know, that's something you need to place a lot of value on, and I did. And in the Marine Corps, they reinforced it. I've never changed that. And, you know, I will bid on deals, always with a fair price, but I will have people, other businessmen, give me the deal over somebody that maybe bids more money or better terms, because they know I'll do exactly what I say I'll do.
Mm-hmm. And you've made some deals, because you started GoDaddy and you sold the majority stake, not all of it, but the majority stake in it in 2011 for $2.3 billion.
I did.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, that's a stack of cash.
Yeah. I'll take your word for that. That was the biggest deal you'd made at that point, right?
Absolutely.
What was your thinking when you walked away from making that deal?
You know, you always wonder if you did the right deal, right? Yeah. But, you know, I think I just smiled and I was thinking, well done, Bobby. I got to tell you, you know, you show me a successful business person, and I'll show you somebody that has failed time and time again, because that's how we learn.
That's right. Yeah, but you stay with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I always said the difference between winners and losers is winners do things losers don't want to do, and one of those things is you do it until. You don't do it for a month, you don't do it for a year, you do it until you get where you're going. You do it until you get it right. And I think that was pretty right.
Yeah, and there's also one more thing, is winners are doing it for the right reason. I mean, they're building their business to make a difference, to deliver something nobody else is doing. And it could be at a price nobody else is doing, or at a product or a way of delivering it. But, you know, that's the number one thing that's driving them. What they're not doing it for is to make a buck.
Yeah. You got to be passionate about what you're doing.